True magnetism is not about outward beauty. You might meet someone with a perfect figure, a golden ratio face, a seductive scent, and words polished like a well-rehearsed script. But just a few minutes in, you start to feel bored, even irritated. Meanwhile, someone else might be plain-looking, dressed simply, saying nothing special, yet you feel drawn to them, wanting to stay near them just a little longer. The question is, what truly makes someone so irresistibly magnetic? Most of us mistake magnetism for appearance. From a young age, we are taught that we must be attractive, impressive, always likable to be accepted. But true magnetism is not the paint on the outside. It radiates from within. It is psychological energy. People often think energy is purely physical, abundant, healthy, quick movements. But psychological energy is different. It is like an invisible electromagnetic field around each person. Some people enter a room without saying a word, and you feel pulled toward them. Others, no matter how carefully dressed, make the air feel stiff. Carl Jung once said, "What you repress controls you. What you integrate radiates from you." This is the secret. Magnetism is not something you try to show. It is what naturally shines through when you are no longer hiding who you are. Think back to the last time you met someone whose eyes held something deeper, hard to explain. Eyes that were not particularly beautiful or heavily made up, but carried a stillness, a certain depth that made you feel seen. That is not a communication technique. That is the energy of someone who has dared to face themselves, who has entered the dark corners of their soul most people avoid. We often believe that to be attractive, we need to show more. In truth, magnetism comes from the ability to hold back desire, to hold back the need for approval, to hold back the fear of rejection. Those who master the art of holding, who do not rush to reveal themselves, emit a kind of inner tension, and it is this tension, not words or gestures, that draws people in. One evening, I sat in my usual cafe. The room was dim, golden light spilling onto every face. A woman walked in. She was not the most striking person in the room. White shirt, hair tied back, no revealing clothes, no stylish flair. But something strange happened. Every time she stopped, the whole room seemed to pause with her, not because people turned to look, but because her presence created a special kind of stillness. I watched. She did not smile much, did not try to make conversation. But when she looked at someone, her gaze lasted just long enough for the other person to feel seen, yet quick enough to keep some mystery. Like a book opened just a few pages, making you want to read more. That was when I understood. Magnetism is not in what you show. It is in what you hold back. Jung believed we carry a living reservoir inside us, a place where instincts, fears, and suppressed desires continue to stir. When we reject them, they control us from the shadows. But when we dare to see them, accept them, and integrate them, they become a source of power. Someone who has faced their own darkness radiates a kind of depth you can sense instantly. They do not need to prove anything. They do not need to show off. Their body, their words, even their breath, carry the imprint of a soul that has walked through the storm. And the truth is, we are drawn not to beauty, but to depth. Picture two people. The first is stylish, walks confidently, speaks cleverly, but every move whispers a silent question: do they like me? Their smile is slightly forced, their eyes dart around, their voice a little rushed. You might be impressed at first, but after a few minutes, the attraction fades, leaving only fatigue. The second has an average appearance, speaks little, but their eyes are calm, their voice unhurried, their gestures measured. In their silence, you feel a quiet strength, like they have nothing to prove. Being near them, you want to breathe slower, listen more, and before you realize it, you are drawn to them. That is the difference between someone chasing attention and someone owning their energy. Here is an interesting truth. When you try to imitate a style or a seductive persona, it often backfires, because the mind and body of others are sensitive enough to detect pretense. But when you truly integrate the parts of yourself that were once rejected, your desires, fears, and primal instincts, you no longer need to act. That energy, raw and unforced, becomes the kind of magnetism that lasts. There is a kind of presence you cannot fake. It is the presence of someone who has made peace with themselves, someone who has weathered their inner storms and returned to stillness. When they are silent, it does not feel awkward. It feels full. When they look at you, it does not feel invasive. It feels present, and you are drawn to them, not because they are beautiful, but because they are deep. You see, in today's world, people crave truth more than ever. Too many images, too many masks, too many layers of falsehood. We scroll through hundreds of faces each day online, yet we remember the eyes of the one person who truly showed up. Because real magnetism does not come from the ego seeking recognition. It comes from the soul that has faced itself. Next time you walk into a room, instead of rushing to say something impressive, try silence. Let your silence carry weight. Observe more. Hold back more. You will feel the atmosphere shift. People will start to notice, not because you tried, but because they sense a different energy in you. That is magnetism. It does not come from the image you put on. It comes from the energy you carry. It is not in what you add, but in what you are brave enough to hold back. There is a paradox. The less you try to prove, the more irresistible you become. In the next part, we will explore the secret of silence, no longer an empty space, but a doorway to the deep power of presence. There is a kind of silence that makes others uncomfortable, and there is a kind of silence so magnetic that you cannot look away. The difference lies in the inner world of the one who holds it. We are often afraid of silence. In a conversation, when we have nothing to say, we quickly fill the gap with small talk. When we walk into a crowded room without knowing anyone, we feel small, force a smile, and pretend to be busy with our phones. All of this just to hide one fear. If I say nothing, will I be looked down upon? But in that very moment, we lose our magnetism. Because when we rush to fill the space, we allow our energy to be pulled by the expectations of others. I remember a company party. Everyone was laughing, music was loud, glasses clinking. There was a man standing in the corner. He was not the boss, nor was he dressed any differently. But what caught my attention was this: he did not rush to make conversation, did not smile too much, did not try to join the crowds. He just stood there, a glass in hand, his eyes calm and observant. The strange thing was, over time, people started to approach him. Slowly, more and more gathered around him. He did not try to shine, yet people were drawn to him, as if pulled by an invisible force. That was when I realized silence is not the absence of something. It can be a powerful presence. Jung once said that when we are led by the unconscious, it controls us. But when we are aware, we become the master of ourselves, and silence is the test. The one who can endure silence without panic holds a steady inner world. In that silence, you can feel real confidence, not the loud kind that says, "Look at me," but a quiet confidence, like a rock standing firm in a flowing river. It does not resist, it does not shout, and yet it remains with dignity. The first law of magnetism: do not rush to explain. It sounds simple, but think back to the last time someone asked you a hard question or stared at you too long. Our first instinct is often to justify, to explain, to prove that we are okay, that we are trustworthy. But this rush often reveals our insecurity. In contrast, the most magnetic people are rarely in a hurry. When surrounded by silence, they do not feel the need to break it. When asked a tough question, they might simply smile, pause, and only then respond. That pause is what shows others they are not carried by the rhythm around them. They set their own rhythm. I once interviewed a young candidate. He had a strong resume and good skills, but when asked about his greatest weakness, he immediately answered, speaking nonstop for 3 minutes, trying to explain and defend himself. His answer was not bad, but it left a feeling of fragility. Another candidate, older, received the same question. He sat quietly for a few seconds, eyes steady, breath calm. Then he said slowly, "My greatest weakness? I tend to take on too much at once, and I am learning to choose what truly matters." A simple answer, but I still remember his eyes and the silence before he spoke. That moment of silence was what made me trust him. The second law of magnetism: do not try to conquer. Think about love. Who is more attractive? The one who constantly sends messages, gives compliments, tries hard to win you over, or the one who does little, yet every look and gesture makes you feel seen and chosen without needing to say it? Magnetic people are not the ones who try to have you. They are the ones who do not need you to feel whole, but whose wholeness draws you closer. Jung described libido not just as sexual energy, but as life energy. When you pour that energy into trying to make others like you, you lose it. But when you hold it in observation, in stillness, In restraint, you gain something else: the power of presence. A friend once told me that when she was younger, she used to try too hard on dates. She laughed more, talked more, tried to prove she was interesting. But the more she tried, the more distant her dates seemed to become. Later, as she matured, she changed. She no longer tried to grab attention. Instead, she simply showed up, listened, stayed silent when needed. Strangely, once she stopped trying to conquer, she became more attractive than ever. Maybe, she laughed, I learned to sit still and let others walk toward me. The archetype behind these laws is the image of the silent sage, the one who does not chase attention, does not rush to prove themselves, but whose presence is like an ancient tree, grounded, quiet, and magnetic. We often think we have to do more to be loved, but sometimes it is the not doing that becomes the most powerful pull. Imagine this. You walk into a room. Instead of rushing to talk, you sit in a corner, breathe deeply, and observe. You are not cold, but you are not hurried. Slowly, others begin to feel that something about you is different. You do not dissolve into the chaos. You hold your own rhythm, and that makes you stand out. This is the nature of magnetism. Whoever controls the rhythm controls the attention. In today's world, where everyone is trying to perform themselves, the calmness within silence has become rare. And that rarity is what makes you shine. When you can sit in silence without discomfort, you have something most people lack. When you no longer need to prove anything, you hold a power most have forgotten. And when you learn to be silent without trembling, something remarkable happens. Your presence begins to shift the room. Without a word, without an extra gesture, others feel that you are the center. Some people walk into a room without an introduction, without flashy clothes, without trying to be funny or charming, and yet all eyes slowly turn to them. It is not magic. It is the power of presence. We often think presence means being noticed, being loud, being the center of attention. But the truth is the opposite. Presence is not noise. It is the field of energy that radiates when someone is truly here, fully in the moment. I remember attending a seminar once. The keynote speaker did not appear right away. People waited, the room buzzing with chatter. Then the door opened. A middle-aged man walked in. He was not tall, not dressed in an expensive suit. Yet within seconds, the whole room fell silent. No one said a word. The energy shifted. He did not speak right away. He walked slowly to his seat, eyes calmly scanning the room. In just a few seconds of silence, it felt like the whole space had rearranged itself around him. What caused that effect? Not his appearance, not his actions. It was the density of his presence, as if he was fully here, in every step, every breath. The third law of magnetism: master your presence before you appear. A common mistake is thinking presence depends on how much attention you get. But in truth, presence is the energy you bring into the space even before anyone notices you. It is not measured by how much laughter you cause or how many stories you tell. It is measured by how the room changes when you enter it. Some people walk in and the air feels heavy. Others bring light with them. Some stay silent, yet you feel a pull. That is because they have mastered their presence before offering it to the world. So how do you master presence? The answer lies in inner wholeness. A person torn apart by too many thoughts, worries, and expectations will have a thin and fragile presence. You will feel their body is here, but their mind is far away. In contrast, someone who is centered, who gathers their energy inward, who is not dragged by the past or the future, every small gesture they make carries weight. I once met an old artist. He said, "People think I am captivating because of my voice or my eyes. But really, it is all because of one thing. I am here. When I look at you, I am not thinking about what to eat later. I am not thinking about who upset me yesterday. I am just here, with you, completely." That kind of presence creates a magnetic field. But presence is not just about being here. It is also about controlling rhythm and expectation. Humans crave certainty. We want to know what is coming next. But at the same time, we are drawn to anticipation, to the unknown. This is the paradox. If you give everything right away, curiosity fades. If you hold back at the right moment, desire lingers. This is where neuroscience meets the art of living. Dopamine in the brain is not released by the reward itself, but by the anticipation of the reward. A surprise gift, an unfinished sentence, a touch that pauses halfway, all these spark the brain into life. I once witnessed a powerful scene. In a small bar, a couple sat side by side. The man kept talking, joking, touching her arm and her hair. It was all too fast, too much. She smiled, but her eyes began to wander. Nearby, another man sat in silence. When he turned toward her, his eyes rested on her for just a moment, then looked away. No rush, no effort. But each time his eyes returned, it sent a ripple through the air. I saw it clearly. The woman began to pay more attention to him, not because he did more, but because he understood the art of the pause. Magnetism is the dance of opposites, near and far, touch and restraint, reveal and silence. The impatient give away everything at once, spilling their energy. Those too closed off reveal nothing, and people lose interest. But those who reveal a little and hold a little create a sweet tension that others cannot resist. Jung called this the tension of opposites, a force of psychological transformation. And in the realm of magnetism, it becomes the engine of desire. Think of music. A beautiful melody is not made by all the notes playing at once, but by the pauses, the waiting before the next sound arrives. The silence makes the music emotional. People are the same. When you know when to pause, when to stay silent, when to hold back, you are composing a symphony of presence. I once heard an older man say, "I used to think women liked me more when I talked a lot." Later, I realized that sometimes the most attractive thing is not what you say, but the pause before you say it. That pause is like a sliver of light through a half-closed door, making others curious to look inside. This is the secret of presence, not rushing, not showing off, but always leaving an echo. The most magnetic person is not the one who speaks the most, but the one who leaves the most silence behind. They know when to step back and let longing rise in others naturally. And when you begin to practice this, something shifts. You stop wondering, what do they think of me? You no longer rush to fill the silence. Instead, you stand steady in it. And when you finally speak, or simply glance at someone, its effect is tenfold. Presence cannot be faked. It only comes when you are truly with yourself, not escaping, not scattered. And from that state, you begin to control the rhythm of connection, when to move closer, when to step back, when to open up, when to be still. The strange thing is, once you control the rhythm, you become the invisible conductor of every relationship. Others begin to follow the pace you set, without even realizing it. That is the art of presence. In the next chapters, we will dive deeper into the language of the unconscious and how even the smallest gestures can touch the deepest parts of someone's soul. But before we move on, remember this magnetism does not begin with what you do to others. It begins with whether you are truly present with yourself. There is a language we all understand, even though we were never taught it. It cannot be found in any dictionary, and it needs no translation. This is the language of the unconscious. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately sensed that someone felt off, even though they were smiling and speaking normally, or felt drawn to someone for no clear reason, as if there was an invisible current between you? That is the unconscious speaking. Jung believed that the body and mind are never separate. What you hide inside still reveals itself in your eyes, your voice, your breath, your steps. And the unconscious of others picks up on this, even if the conscious mind cannot name it. We are not truly attracted to clothing or hairstyles. We are drawn to the energy behind them. Someone who is full of inner conflict may smile brightly, but you still feel uneasy around them. On the other hand, someone who has made peace with themselves may dress simply, but just standing still, they make you feel safe. One night, I was sitting in a train station in New York. A woman walked in, clearly tired after a long day. Her face was bare, her clothes simple, but there was something about her I could not look away from. Every step she took was slow, steady. She was not looking for attention, yet the space around her paused for a moment. I realized her body was speaking for her. It was the body of someone fully with herself, not scattered, not pretending. That brief glance was a quiet reminder. The body is a mirror of the soul. The fourth law of magnetism, emotional synchronization. Imagine a partnered dance. If the lead moves too quickly, the steps become awkward. If the other is too slow, the rhythm breaks. Only when both feel the same pulse can the dance become beautiful. Communication is the same. Attraction does not come from dominating or taking full control. It comes from your ability to sense the emotional rhythm of the other person and sync with it just enough, without losing yourself. Once, I watched two people talking at a cafe. The man did not nod excessively or interrupt to show he was listening. He just sat quietly, fully present. What stood out was this: whenever the woman shifted her tone, his facial expression changed slightly. He leaned in a little. When she laughed, his eyes lit up. When she grew quiet, he slowed down, took a deeper breath. This was not imitation. It was not a rehearsed technique. It was natural synchronization, like two instruments playing in harmony. The result? She leaned toward him more, and her smile became more genuine. Emotional synchronization is not about copying. Imitation that is too obvious feels fake. Instead, it is about sensing the space between two people, a waiting glance, a deep breath, an unexpected pause. These are all invitations. Magnetic people are those who can hear those invitations. Jung called this synchronicity meaningful coincidences, where the inner and outer worlds align. When you are centered and whole within yourself, you begin to sense the subtle signals from others. Every tilt of the head, every heartbeat, every blink becomes part of a rhythm you can join. It is the moment when two people meet not just through words, but through energy. And when this happens, an invisible thread begins to form. Perhaps you have felt it before, a conversation where you do not remember every word, but you remember how connected you felt. That is emotional synchronization. What stays in our minds is not the words, but the rhythm we shared. On the other hand, when there is no synchronization, even the most clever words feel awkward. You make a joke, they miss it. You share something personal, they react too fast or too slow. The entire exchange feels offbeat, like dancing out of sync, and both want to walk away. Emotional synchronization creates magnetism because it makes the other person feel this: I am understood, even before I explain. And that is one of the deepest human desires, to be felt, not just heard. When you touch this need, you do not just become attractive, you become unforgettable. I believe the most beautiful kind of synchronization is when you enter someone else's rhythm without losing your own. You do not dissolve into them, nor do you stay rigid. It is like two rivers, flowing side by side, sometimes touching, sometimes pulling apart, but always moving together. This also means you need both sensitivity and boundaries. Magnetic people do not disappear inside others. They step into the rhythm, then step back at the right moment, leaving space. And that space is what nourishes desire. So if you want to become magnetic, start by listening. Not listening to reply, but listening to feel, to know when to move forward, when to step back, when to pause. That is the art of emotional synchronization. And there is something strange about it. The most powerful moments of connection often come from what is incomplete. Not every story needs a conclusion. Not every emotion needs to be explained. It is the unfinished things that stay with us, because the brain does not remember perfection. It remembers what was left open. Here, we begin to touch another secret of magnetism, the art of absence. Sometimes, what makes others remember you is not all that you gave, but what you carefully held back. A well-timed retreat, a space left in their heart, that is what truly lingers. There is a strange paradox sometimes. It is absence that leaves the deepest impression, not presence. We often think that to be remembered, we must be present constantly, always around, always close. But the human body does not respond endlessly to repeated stimulation. What appears too often eventually loses its value. In contrast, when we step back at the right moment, we leave a space behind. And that space becomes the place where imagination comes alive. Think back to an old love. What you remember most is not the days you saw each other all the time, but the moment they suddenly disappeared, leaving an empty spot in your mind. That emptiness was quickly filled not with truth, but with thoughts, images, longing. And it was this imagination that turned memory into obsession. This is the art of absence, the fifth law of magnetism. Use absence as a language. This does not mean disappearing to punish someone, nor is it a game of manipulation. Absence here is an intentional retreat, a step back, to give space for the other person's emotions to rise. Magnetic people know how to disappear, as if they trust that the trace they left behind is strong enough to live on in someone's mind. And strangely, it is this trust that makes it true. Jung once said that where there is no consciousness, fate takes over. When you step back, you give the other person's unconscious a chance to fill in the image of you. And when that happens, you are no longer just a person. You become a symbol in their mind. Who can compete with a symbol crafted by the unconscious? I remember a story. A man deeply loved a woman. He messaged her constantly, looked for every chance to meet, afraid she would forget him if he was not present. But over time, she started pulling away. Not because she didn't like him, but because his constant presence became suffocating. Meanwhile, another man appeared less often. He left only small traces, a glance that lasted a moment longer than usual, a sentence left unfinished, then quietly stepped away. And it was those silences that made her think of him more. She wondered, what is he doing? What is he thinking of me? That is the power of timely absence. But absence is only half the secret. The other half lies in conscious touch. We touch each other every day, a quick handshake, a polite pat on the shoulder, a brief hug. But rarely do we touch with full presence. Most touches are habit, unconscious, like a reflex. And because of that, they pass by without leaving anything behind. But a conscious touch that can become a memory you never forget. The sixth law of magnetism. Turn touch into a gateway. This is not about boldness. It is about meaning. A touch that lingers half a second longer. A hand that pauses just slightly. A moment of stillness before fingers gently meet a forearm. All of this can create an invisible current. Because in that touch, you are not just using your hand. You are bringing your presence, your mind, your energy. I remember an evening. A female friend told me she once met a man only briefly. During their short conversation, he gently touched her shoulder to get her attention. It was so subtle she barely noticed it at the time. But days later, she still remembered the feeling. Not because it was bold, she said, but because it carried attention. It felt like he was truly there, in that moment, with me. A conscious touch is never invasive. It is an invitation, a signal that says, I am here and I see you. The body holds emotional memory. When a touch carries focused energy, it doesn't just awaken the skin, it awakens emotional memory. People may forget what you said, but they will remember the touch that made them shiver, even for a second. And here, I want to pause to whisper something to you. The one listening to this story, if something I've shared has touched you, if you feel a memory, a fear, or a desire rising from within, take just a second to respond. Tap like. Share this with someone you think might need it too. And if you want to keep walking this path with me, the path of exploring the depths of the psyche, then subscribe. Because maybe, right now, you also need an invisible touch, not through the skin, but through this story. Back to the journey. When you learn to balance absence with conscious touch, you begin to master a deeper rhythm. You leave a mark through space, then awaken memory through subtle gestures. Others won't be able to say why they're drawn to you. They'll only say, I've never felt this way with anyone else. That is when you stop being just a person. You become an experience. And experiences cannot be replaced. What people remember is not how many times you appeared, but the quality of your presence. One well-timed absence, one meaningful touch that is enough to haunt someone for months, even years. And then you discover another secret. Magnetism does not come from what you give more of. It comes from what you choose to hold back. When you do not say everything, when your touch is not complete, when your presence is not constant, the other person's unconscious begins to fill in the blanks with imagination. And in that imagination, you become the thing they long for. But there is one more layer, more subtle, more profound. How do you keep mystery alive without falling into predictable patterns? Because if you keep showing up and disappearing in the same way, the mystery becomes a routine. And routine is the enemy of desire. Desire does not die from a lack of love. It dies from repetition. You can love someone deeply, passionately even. But if every day plays out the same words, the same touch, the same rhythm, the fire will begin to fade. Not because the love is gone, but because the human mind is wired to adapt. Anything repeated too often loses its meaning. The seventh law of magnetism. Never repeat the same pattern of behavior. This does not mean you have to constantly change, becoming a different person each day. No. The secret lies in transformation within the same essence. You are still you, but you know how to create subtle variations, so that your presence never becomes dull. Jung once described psychic energy not as a straight line, but as a spiral. It returns to familiar points, but at a deeper level, a higher turn. Magnetism works the same way. It needs some repetition to create a sense of familiarity, but also novelty to keep curiosity alive. If everything is too new, people feel uneasy. If everything is too predictable, they feel bored. The art is in maintaining a balance between the known and the unknown. I remember a friend once told me about her relationship. Her partner never changed too much, same voice, same calm demeanor. But on some days, he was quiet and gentle, like a misty afternoon. On other days, he was playful, spontaneous, like a small fire, suddenly leaping to life. She said, "I never felt bored because I could never quite predict which version of him I'd meet today. And that made me want to see him again." Mystery is not about hiding everything. It is the art of revealing just enough. A story left unfinished, a glance that goes unexplained, a hesitant smile. These quiet spaces become open doors for imagination. And it is imagination, not certainty, that is the richest soil where desire grows. Once, I met a woman at a library. We talked about books. She shared a small story, then stopped, as if there was more but chose not to say it. I asked. She simply smiled and said, "Next time." That next time followed me for days, haunting me more than any full story ever could. That is the secret. Hold back a piece, so others keep longing for more. In the world of performance, this is called the rule of surprise. A great performer never lets the audience predict everything. They know how to build rhythm, create tension, and then suddenly shift direction. Not too much to overwhelm, not too little to bore. In personal magnetism, you are also an artist, and your audience is the person you seek to connect with. Imagine this: if every time you meet someone, you tell the same stories, touch the same way, react with the same expressions, their unconscious begins to fall asleep. But if today you are a warm breeze, tomorrow a sudden spark, today you are quiet, tomorrow you laugh out loud, their unconscious never stops searching for you. Magnetic people do not change their nature. They shift their resonance. Like a jazz melody always rooted in the same theme, but each time played with a new variation that leaves the listener enchanted. I once asked a man, who was often described as irresistible, "What is your secret?" He smiled and said simply, "I never let them know what I'll do next. But I also never change so much that I feel unfamiliar. I keep them right at the edge, safe, but curious." That reminded me of a fire in a fireplace. It is steady enough to make you feel safe, but now and then, a spark shoots out unexpectedly, making you blink in surprise. If the fire burned exactly the same way every second, it would become just another lamp. But those sudden sparks keep you watching. Many relationships do not fade because love ends. They fade because surprise disappears. People start to predict each other's words, gestures, and reactions. When everything becomes expected, desire disappears. And when desire disappears, love grows cold. Magnetic people understand this well. They do not give everything away at once. They turn each meeting, each moment, into a small, unexpected gift. Not dramatic, just different enough to keep the unconscious awake. And most important of all, the surprise must come from truth. You cannot fake change. You cannot force surprise. The unconscious is far too sensitive to believe anything inauthentic. Subtle transformation only comes from someone who is truly alive inside, truly fluid, and in motion. Jung once said that human vitality moves in spirals. It never stands still. The attractive ones are those who move with that spiral, so that each encounter is not a copy, but a deeper, richer version. So if you want to keep your magnetism alive, learn to hold back some mystery. Never give away the whole story. All your energy, your entire self, in one sitting. Let others always feel there's still something about them I haven't figured out. It is that feeling of not quite finished that keeps desire burning. And when you master this mystery, you step into a deeper layer of attraction, the ability to touch the primal instincts of another. Because in the end, desire is not controlled by logic. It is shaped by the oldest parts of the brain and body, the places that hold the memories of thousands of years of evolution. There are strange moments in life, a fleeting glance, a breath that brushes your skin, a sudden scent, and you feel yourself pulled towards someone so powerfully that even you can't explain why. You don't sit down to analyze. You don't make a list of pros and cons. Your body decides before your mind even has time to speak. It's not a conscious choice. It's primal instinct. The eighth law of magnetism. Awaken ancient instincts. We like to think we are rational and intelligent, but most of our desire is triggered by ancient parts of the brain areas that control survival, heartbeat, breath, fear, and craving. These parts don't speak logic, but they decide who you're drawn to, who you remember, and who you ache for. Have you ever felt your heart rate rise when someone entered the room? Felt your breath shift? Just because their eyes passed over you? That is your body responding before your mind can say, I like this person. Truly magnetic people know how to awaken that primal part, not with loud tricks, but with the smallest details. The pace of their walk, their breath as they listen, the way they tilt their head or hold eye contact just 1 second longer than expected. Jung believed that within the collective unconscious, we carry archetypes, ancient images passed down over thousands of years. When someone embodies one of these archetypes, they instantly touch a deep, instinctive part of others. A calm, grounded man can awaken the archetype of the ancient hunter. An intuitive, deeply listening woman can stir the memory of the mythical goddess. A serene soul, steady in chaos, may embody the wise sage. These images need no explanation. They bypass logic and speak directly to the unconscious, where true desire is born. I once met a man who said, I'm not handsome. I'm not wealthy. But women often tell me they're drawn to me without knowing why. He didn't do much, but the way he stood, the way he breathed, the calm in his eyes, all of it combined to trigger something deeply familiar in the female unconscious, a sense of safety. That's instinct, the craving for safety, but also the desire to be awakened. But instinct is only half the secret. The other half lies in sensory memory. The ninth law of magnetism. Leave a sensory imprint that cannot be replaced. We think we remember people through stories and shared moments. But what we actually remember most deeply are the sensory traces. A faint scent can bring back a long-buried love. A light touch on the arm can make your heart race again, even long after it's over. Magnetic people don't try to become the only one through logic. They become the only experience through sensation. I once met an old musician. He said, people think they remember me for the song. No, they remember me because I created an atmosphere only I could create. When I walked on stage, their heartbeat changed. Their breath shifted. That's what they can't forget. Exactly. People don't become addicted to you. They become addicted to the feeling only you gave them. You see this clearly in love. A specific embrace, a unique rhythm of a kiss, a pause just before lips touch, all of it becomes an emotional signature. And once someone has gotten used to that signature, they won't find it in anyone else. Others may be more attractive, smarter, richer, but they cannot recreate your experience. So when you are gone, they do not just miss a person. They miss a sensation that no one else can give. In neuroscience, it's known that the brain stores memories most strongly when emotional intensity meets physical experience. A sentence may be forgotten, but a breath with a gaze, a touch with the scent of your skin that stays, like electricity etched into memory. Think about the last time you truly missed someone. Did you remember their words? Or did you remember the sound of their voice, the way their hand rested on your back, the way their scent lingered as they walked away? That is sensory memory. Magnetic people know how to create those imprints. Not many, not loudly, just one, at the right time, and it stays. There's something fascinating. People don't always remember the exact details, but they remember the feeling. And because it's unclear, it becomes obsessive. The unconscious hates the incomplete, so it keeps searching. That's why absence becomes painful. They don't just miss you. They miss the experience you gave them. And once that experience is imprinted, no one else can replace it. When you touch ancient instinct and leave behind a sensory memory, you move beyond being just a person. You become an emotional symbol, an experience that can't be replicated. And once that happens, your presence is no longer just presence. It becomes a sweet obsession, something that lives on in the unconscious of the other. But there's an even deeper level when you learn how to keep desire alive, never letting it die from predictability. This is where the art reaches its peak, to desire fiercely, but remain refined in control. There is a great mistake in how we think about magnetism. We believe that to be attractive, we must suppress our desire completely, that coldness and detachment are what create mystery. But the truth is the opposite. Intense desire is the source of true magnetism. Only when there is a real fire within you can others feel the warmth radiating from you. The key is not to extinguish the fire, but to keep it burning with grace. Magnetic people are not those without desire. They are the ones who let it burn in their eyes, in every breath, but never let it erupt into a destructive flame. They turn desire into a magnetic field, powerful enough to be felt, but never so much that it overwhelms. I remember once meeting an old photographer. He told me, "Real beauty is not about seeing everything. It's about sensing that there is more behind what you see. Desire is the same. I always let it show in my gaze, but never let it become a rush. That restraint is what gives it depth." The 10th law of magnetism: desire deeply, but master it with elegance. Desire is raw energy, like unshaped metal. If you throw it out recklessly, it feels rough, rigid, and can scare people off. But if you forge it, shape it, refine it, it becomes gold. Jung called this process alchemy, the transformation of the soul, taking raw material impulse, lust, fear, and refining it into strength, presence, and eventually, light. Imagine looking into someone's eyes. If their gaze is empty, lacking desire, it passes unnoticed. But if there's fire in their eyes, you feel it instantly. Still, if the fire is too intense, it becomes invasive, even threatening. But if it flickers just enough, you are drawn in, wanting to stay, wanting to see more. That is the art, keeping the flame alive just enough for others to feel it, but never so much that they run away. In love, this becomes even more clear. Some people love with complete outburst. They give too much, too fast, too intensely, and soon that fire burns both sides to ashes. Others suppress so much that love turns cold, lifeless, drained of spirit. The most magnetic ones are those who balance fire with finesse. I once heard a woman speak about a man she could never forget. He was never aggressive, but every time he looked at me, I felt desired. He didn't need words. He didn't need to act out. Just in his eyes, I knew he wanted me, but I also knew he was in control, and that control drove me wild. This is the final secret of magnetism. The strongest people are not those without desire, but those who feel it deeply and are not ruled by it. Think back to those moments when you stood in front of someone and felt your heart race, your face flush. That is the moment life energy rises. And you have two choices: either let it rush out, making you frantic, clumsy, and less magnetic, or hold it in your chest, letting it radiate through your eyes, your voice, your every move. A person who knows how to hold the flame in their chest can warm the whole room, even without touching anyone. I once watched a flamenco dancer perform. She didn't begin with movement. She stood still, staring at the crowd. Yet you could feel a fire burning inside her. Then, step by step, hand by hand, it poured out slowly. No rush, no drama. And the whole room was captivated, unable to look away. That was the perfect example of desire, held, refined, and expressed with grace. When you live with desire but are not ruled by it, you become a source of energy. Others feel life in you, and at the same time, feel safe. You are both the flame and the hearth. You awaken and you protect. And it is this combination that makes you unforgettable. There is a quote from Jung that I love. "The unconscious shapes destiny." When you master the fire within, you are no longer dragged around by the unconscious. You become the one who shapes your own fate. And at that point, your magnetism goes beyond attraction. It becomes inspiration. It becomes elevation. The truly magnetic ones don't just make others desire them. They make others want to become better by being near them, because their presence whispers, "You too can live with fire and not be burned." And then you realize magnetism is no longer about getting someone. It becomes about turning yourself into an irreplaceable experience. You are no longer just a man or a woman. You become a symbol, a memory, an energetic field. You are what people dream of at night, what they remember in silence, what they carry into every love after you. Magnetism, in the end, is not about conquering the body. It is about awakening the soul. And if you've walked this journey with me all the way here, perhaps you've already sensed it. This path was never just about becoming attractive to others. It was always about returning to yourself, from embracing your shadows, Mastering silence, being fully present, holding mystery, refining desire, all of it brings you to one place, becoming the most whole version of yourself. Because when you are truly whole, you don't need to chase magnetism. It radiates, and others, whether they intend to or not, will be drawn into your orbit. Perhaps this is the final meaning of magnetism. It is no longer a game of love. It becomes the journey of the soul, a path where you no longer chase attention. You become light. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.